Thread is a relatively new mesh-based networking protocol, which I assume, like most of you, gets me super excited. But seriously, it is actually a really big thing for the Internet of Things and smart home devices, notably for Matter smart home networks. I'm James Bruce, you're watching Matter Alpha, and in today's video I want to take a deep technical dive at a level I hope anyone can understand on Thread and why it matters. So on the technical side, Thread is known as 802.15.4 as opposed to Wi-Fi, which is 802.11. Whatever. And unlike a lot of other wireless communications protocols, it's based on existing network stacks, which makes it really easy for developers to work with and doesn't require proprietary code. So what do I mean by a network stack? Think of networked communications as layers of the wrapping on a present in a children's game of pass the parcel. In the juicy center of the parcel, you have your data, the present, the thing you're trying to use, perhaps a web page. Your application then wraps up the present and says, I'm Google Chrome. Then Chrome hands the data off to the operating system, and that wraps it up with things like a network address, so that when this present is unwrapped again on the way back to your router, it knows it's for this machine with this address. And then your machine knows it's for Google Chrome. And your Google Chrome knows that's the data for this web page. So on the very outer layer of this pass the parcel of networking happiness is the physical layer. So let's say Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And these can be interchanged, right? You might be visiting some web page on your desktop and then you pull the Ethernet cable out and it switches over to Wi-Fi. Chrome doesn't care how you're transmitting it. It doesn't even know. It doesn't care what the IP address to the computer is. So that information is all encapsulated in layers, and the very most outer layer is the hardware. Am I being sent over Wi-Fi or Ethernet or something else? And that's where we get to Thread. Thread is that something else. So when I say Thread is based on existing networking stacks, I mean it's the very same pass the parcel as Ethernet and Wi-Fi. It uses the same IP version 6 addresses, and it can carry the very same data at the core. It's just that outer layer, the physical signals, that are different. So every device on the Thread network will have an IP address in much the same way that your computer or smartphone does, and they will be individual and unique on your whole home network. And on a bit of a tangential but also quite critical at this point, you might know of IP addresses in the form 192.168.0.1. Perhaps that's how you access your router settings page. But that's actually an IP version 4 address, which is very limited in terms of how many devices can be on your network, about 255 in total. Since smart homes tend to be full of sensors and motors and other gadgets and things, you need more addresses. So IP version 6 allows loads more. It's a lot longer address in hexadecimal, so there are numbers as well as letters. So for instance, my computer has an IPv6 address of FDAF. Yeah, I'm not reading all that. And it's okay for me to tell you that because it's a local address. It's not unique in the entire world. It's only unique on my home network. So don't worry, you can't hack me because you know my internal IP address. But here's the critical bit. If your home router is not capable of using IP version 6 addresses, you won't be able to use Thread devices. But that's probably not an issue as long as you're not using something provided by your ISP from 10 years ago. So let's talk about existing network and wireless protocols more broadly and how Thread fits into that and why it's brilliant for the smart home. So you probably know about Ethernet, that's the cables that you can plug directly into your router with, and Wi-Fi, the most ubiquitous wireless networking for smartphones, tablets, etc., everything else. You probably also know about Bluetooth, which is very short range, but it can do things like broadcast a beacon of information, which Wi-Fi can't. Which, by the way, makes Bluetooth very useful for setting up Matter smart home devices before they can join your home network. You can use Bluetooth to find the new device. It will broadcast its information on a beacon, then send the information you need for it to access your main network. And at that point, it'll join in with everything else. You might not know about Zigbee or Z-Wave, which have been the predominant network for smart home equipment for the past decade or so. Both Z-Wave and Zigbee are also mesh networks, meaning all of the devices can connect to each other and sometimes relay information to other nodes. On a technical level, they run at different frequencies. So Z-Wave signals tend to go further and they work more reliably thanks to lower radio frequency, but they operate more slowly, while Zigbee doesn't go as far, but it operates faster, albeit with some interference being commonplace because it sort of shares the same wireless space with Wi-Fi and other home appliances of 2.4 gigahertz. So Z-Wave is a proprietary system and requires a hub, while Zigbee is a more standardized system that can send communications between different devices, even from different manufacturers in theory, but it still needs a hub for you to do anything useful with it because nothing else on your network can talk to a Zigbee device without translating messages and addresses. So Zigbee and Z-Wave, they're the past of smart home. Then we get to Thread. Which is actually heavily based on Zigbee, at least at a hardware level. It's the exact same physical radio chips, the radio waves, as Zigbee uses. And it's the Zigbee Alliance, in fact, that created Thread. But the key difference is that it talks the same language as Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And it uses, as I mentioned, the same IP version 6 addresses as anything else on your network. So remember when I talked about the layers of wrapping on the parcel of networking? Thread is there alongside Wi-Fi and Ethernet on the outer layer, being exactly the same. It's just the hardware difference. Instead of being transmitted over a Wi-Fi signal, it's transmitted over a Thread signal. So unlike Zigbee, which needed a hub for commissioning and security, Thread devices can be securely commissioned using a smartphone and QR codes. So it's a lot easier to work with for consumers as well. But, and there's a big but here, using anything based on Thread requires a Thread border router, which is a bit like a hub. We've got a separate video on what exactly a Thread border router is, but the TLDR version is that you need it to move the physical messages back and forth from your home Wi-Fi and the Ethernet to the Thread mesh network. Just like your home router does exactly the same job of moving messages between Wi-Fi and Ethernet. The Thread border router moves them between Wi-Fi or Ethernet and Thread. Simple enough. So what's brilliant about Thread then? For a start, it's super low power. Compared to the likes of Wi-Fi, which hoovers up watts, Thread devices and sensors can run on a small sip of battery power for perhaps a year at a time, which is great when you have a house full of them. Thread is self-healing, meaning that if the path it uses to transmit messages no longer works because something went offline, it'll figure out a new path without you needing to jump in and, say, rebuild the network or restart your router. The same is true of your border router. While a Zigbee network just failed if your one Zigbee hub went down for whatever reason, if you have multiple Thread border routers on your network, which is quite likely given it's built into a lot of smart assistants or speakers, etc., then another border router can immediately be elected as the routing point. So you don't need to go this way, it'll automatically route round here. As I mentioned, it's a mesh network. Though, like all mesh networks, not all Thread devices will act as repeaters to pass the message on along the network. Only those with a permanent power source can do that. So if you had a hardwired thermostat, or a plug-in socket, that can repeat messages around the Thread network and pass them along. But if you have a battery-powered Thread door and window sensor, for instance, that won't. It'll only wake up to respond to messages that are directly addressed to it, or to transmit some data because it got triggered. So ideally, you want some of those plugs, some light bulbs, something else that will be always plugged into your Thread network for the best performance. Thread is also secure and scalable, so you can have thousands of sensors and devices on the same Thread network. So that's basically what you need to know about Thread. But lastly, the internet is abuzz with news that Apple quietly added a Thread radio chip to a number of Mac, iPhone and iPod products. But why is not entirely clear. There are definitely some advantages in the smart home for sure. In theory, it would mean your computer or iPad could directly control your smart home devices without relying on Wi-Fi. So if your Wi-Fi was down for whatever reason, you could still unlock your door or get critical notifications from your alarm sensors. It would also mean your laptop or your iPad or your desktop could act as a border router, as a backup option if your main border router went down, but that's a stretch and I don't think it's likely, given the nature of them being portable devices and always moving around. And although we think of Thread as being specifically for Matter smart home devices, there's no reason it can't be used for other things like lower latency when streaming music to a HomePod, though in that case it wouldn't actually be the music that gets transmitted. It doesn't have the bandwidth for that, so Thread is very low bandwidth, but rather the message telling the HomePod to start streaming from whatever URL over its Wi-Fi connection. So that would be quicker than sending that initial play this music message to your router and then back to the Thread device. In many cases, it could also replace Bluetooth for faster and more reliable communications, such as between a watch and a smartphone. Right now, for instance, if you leave your smartphone in the kitchen, your watch often doesn't fully work as it should because the Bluetooth goes out of range and it no longer has that data connection. If both of them communicated through Thread, you would have the resiliency of your whole home Thread network, the mesh there, and you could always stay connected. And this could apply to other health items like heart rate or glucose monitors. So that would be really useful. But to be clear, the Thread radio hasn't yet been switched on and they're not doing anything with it yet, it's just there. It could be that it'll never be used. It's more or less there because the very same communications chip that provides Wi-Fi and Bluetooth also happens to be Thread capable, a 3-in-1 chip. Perhaps it's just future-proofing in case something else arises. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive of Thread and other network protocols. I hope it was accessible and useful for you in some way. You've been watching MatterAlpha.com. I'm James Bruce, and I'll see you in the next one.